Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Finance meeting and the Board of Selectmen budget hearing for March 23rd. This is a rescheduled meeting from last Tuesday. And so we would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask our fire chief if he would lead us in the pledge. Oh, police chief, sorry. Okay. Sorry, this is only my second meeting that I've ever run, so bear with me. We had a marathon meeting last Tuesday, and hopefully tonight will go quicker.
And you did a great job.
So our first budget for tonight is the health budget on, on page 264. Hi, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Would you like to give us an overview of your budget before I
sure.
open it up for questions?
Stan Scleary, I'm the Director of the Health Department. So this year, our request represents a .068 increase over the current budget year, which is attributable almost entirely to contractual obligations. The only other increase in our budget is related to fuel costs. We've switched from 2 gas vehicles and 2 natural gas and 1 electric to all 5 Crown Victorias from the police department, and so our fuel costs have gone up accordingly. Other than that, we took the selectmen reduced us $1,000 in our equipment maintenance line item, which will be compensated by not calibrating our scales in the nurses' offices at the schools, which is not a regulatory requirement.
Okay. Okay. How often do the scales normally get calibrated?
We have been doing it annually, and so what had happened over the years was that in years past, we used to do a lot more in-school physicals. Our medical advisor would actually go to the schools and conduct a number of physicals for those children who couldn't afford it. That's not happening very much anymore, and there's no requirement for us to have calibrated scales, and so we figured that was a cost that one way we could reduce our budget to offset some of the increase in the fuel costs.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Timniak?
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Sure. 2 nights ago, it feels like last night because we are till after midnight, but Bob Francis from RICEP was here, and we had a discussion about the opioid grants he's applying for and the extra worker, which is coming through. And I wanted to make sure you were aware of that and looking to take advantage of that in your department.
Yeah, we're involved. Our health educator sits on Fairfield Cares and gets very involved in all the substance abuse and mental health work that the Fairfield Cares is doing for the town.
Okay. All right, so you're on it.
We're on it. We actually revised our entire substance abuse mental health webpage with a variety of new resources as a quality improvement project that we were working on just last month.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay. Well, thank you for
Thank you.
Do you want to do revenue?
Oh, I forgot revenue, sorry. Are there any questions on revenue?
Yes, over here.
Okay, Mr. Bateson.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Cleary. Quick question. State grants. I'm seeing 50,000 going to 40,000. How confident are we that we're going to get the 40,000? Are you getting any preliminary indications from the state?
That is a variable that we don't control, just like the other state cuts we're experiencing this year. As it was explained to me, they have a formula that they use, and they apply that to whatever funds are allocated for that given year. So that is essentially we get a percentage reimbursement for the services we provide in the non-public schools. And so we get that. So whatever the governor decides is the amount that year, They apply that formula, and we get some version of that. When I talked to the folks at the state, they said, that even folks at state education who do the calculations, they say they don't know until they get the number from the governor's office. And so we experienced that drop last year. That was the first one we had experienced that significant. It's always a few $1,000s here or there, but so there's no real way to predict that. So we just went with, I think we went with that one we just used last year's number as the best estimate.
Okay, and all the other revenues, you're basically sticking to 3-year average?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Mr. Timniak?
Yes, thank you. In the revenues, it says barbers cosmetology. Does that include nail salons in that one line?
Cosmetology, yes. Beauty, barber, and nail salons are all fall under the cosmetology license.
They're right in there. When was the last time you looked to change the fee schedule?
We actually changed the fee schedule 2015, and what we did was had the Board of Health vote in an annual 2% increase to all our fees so that it was a standard, once every year it goes up 2% January 1st.
Okay, any further questions?
So if it goes up 2% January 1, I mean, can't these be bumped a little bit then? You've got them all, it looks like at the 3-year average, not accounting for, is that accounting for this year's 2% and the half year next?
I believe with these, we just went with the 3-year average. What's happening with some of our, we're in this process of transitioning to accepting credit card payments, and we're working towards online processing and renewal of licenses, so that even though I think we've been at 2 years now where we've increased the fees 4%, we're taking a slight hit on the fees that the credit cards charge. So it's kind of netting out in terms of the 3-year average now. It's kind of running equal. So that's why we went with that. I think in a couple of years, we'll be able to look at that and maybe just use every year a 2% increase on that.
So on these, you're not charging a credit card processing fee?
No, we're not
So-
charging a processing fee.
Got it. So, yeah, this year, maybe the first 2 years' worth, and then after that, we should be able
Yeah,
to
we
recapture.
voted
Okay.
to up the fees, and then we started working towards providing credit card processing so that we came out hopefully close to revenue neutral on our fees.
Okay, makes sense then. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have one more,
Oh.
sorry.
Okay.
Are all your positions currently filled? Any vacancies?
All of our positions are currently filled.
Okay, are you Human and Social Services too, or no?
No, that would be
Okay.
Terry Geegan.
Okay. Before we go on to that budget, I was presented with a note. We had requested that Mr. Hibson from Human Resources come back tonight to respond to a few questions. So we'll do that next.
Good evening, Emmett Hibson.
Hi, thank you for coming back tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll open it up to the board for any questions, or do we want to just get an overview on, I guess the question was pertaining to stipends and how that works.
So, well, the question that came to me, I was asked, I think last Friday, and I think we prepared a memo and sent it regarding the stipends, a couple of stipends that were out there and a few of the reclasses. So I was asked actually what stipends were out there, but if you want me to go through the process of a stipend or a reclass, I can go through that also.
Yeah, if you could explain the process first.
Sure. So the contracts vary for reclass, but typically an employee or the union, or quite frankly, department head, can seek a reclassification. And basically what you do is it's a job-related duties test, and you look at the job description, you look at the job description of what the department head or the union or the individual say they're doing, and then you kind of group them into job classifications and make a determination as to whether the KSAs of the job that they're claiming they're doing matches where they should be or whether it should be moved up. So I think I've done 3 reclass requests where I've agreed with them since I've been here, and I've put memos together for those, and I've submitted those. But typically what you get is a is review the job descriptions, you talk to the department head, make sure that the duties that the individual's claiming they're doing or the union's claiming they're doing are in fact what they are doing, and then you make a determination as where you think it best fits with the other job duties that have the KSAs and the other job classifications. So that's really a reclass. A stipend is when somebody who's in a job classification that you don't plan on permanently changing the job classification, but you assign duties either because of the individual's skill set or because of a need of a department, but it's a temporary basis or temporary for the duration of the person that's there. So you're not going to actually change, like, say you have a Secretary A, you're not going to move that position up, but you have someone in there that's taking on additional duties, so you'll give the person a stipend to do those duties for as long as the department head either needs the duties done or the person remains doing those duties.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, are there questions? Mr. Matola?
Hi, how are you tonight? On the reclassifications for a particular position, will you look to other municipalities to see if there's a similar job and what the pay rate is for that? Do you ever do that?
It depends. So, if we're doing a salary survey, we'll look to other municipalities. If we're simply doing a job reclassification within our job classification, then we'll stay internal to ours because, that's where they're grouped. So I'm solely looking at what's the KSAs and where the KSAs fall, knowledge, skills, and abilities, sorry for anyone that's not familiar with that. So if it's not a salary request to review, is that in the proper determination, then I'd only look at our contracts.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Timniak?
Yes. All right, thanks for coming back tonight.
Sir.
When you go ahead and you authorize a stipend for an employee, is there a specific account that comes from, or does that come from each employee's department?
Comes from the individual employee's department. I don't have a special account that accounts for either reclasses or stipends. So the department has to, which is why you talk to the department head to make sure there's money in there. And they have to have the money to support the increased duties or reclassification.
Okay.
If I'm granting it, so the contracts have reclass language. If there's a grievance filed, and they win the grievance, then at that point, we have to fund it based off of that. But the ones that are in question were not grievance-based. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no, I understand the step side. I wasn't sure where the stipend side comes from.
Okay.
Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, it would be grievable if they applied for the reclass and you denied it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It wouldn't be grievable by other union employees who thought they were eligible for the same reclass.
No, it would be, so there are a few reclasses that I have not acted upon because I'm not sure they quite frankly are there, but those individuals can, in fact, go to Labor Board and ask them to overrule me.
Okay.
Any further questions?
So you make sure that there's funds in that budget during that year before, like, to cover this, without any other outside transfers before you okay this?
Well, I have a discussion with department head. I'm not sure, I don't think in the case that I did that I spoke with the chief financial officer, but I did speak with the department head to say, if I do this, here's the effect on it, and they're okay with it, with their budget. I still tell them that it will affect their budget, absolutely.
So you may agree to this reclass, and if the budget goes over, it's essentially just up to that department head? But you're not sure if they
I'm
do or
not,
don't?
yeah, I haven't had that, no, I have not had the issue raised to me that I've done something where it's gone over the actual budget for the line item.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Timniak?
Yes. Moving away from the stipends and the reclass, because of the employee hiring freeze we have right now, how many current openings are there which haven't been filled?
So the freeze isn't a hard freeze. It is a freeze where we review the request and make a determination as to if we're going to do it, if we're going to slow it down. So we may let the position stay vacant for, say, 3 or 4 months. I think that's typically what we've been doing for positions that are in the budget, is kind of having a lapse of time, about 3 or 4 months. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's positions that we have not authorized at this point are maybe 3.
Okay, Mr. Matola?
How long have you been here now? Just, is it,
July 5th?
okay, so you're coming up on a year. So were you involved with some of the recruiting of some of the recent department head hirings, or did that happen before your time?
I would say probably 50/50 with that. So the IT director was in the process when I got here. I think they were done with the majority of the interviews and kind of just going through the process. I was not involved with that. The tax collector I was involved with. The tax assessor we're currently doing now. So I would say 50/50.
And I have a real general question for you here, and
Yes, sir.
the people who we've recently hired who have come before us seem tremendously qualified and seem like great candidates. Have you found it at all difficult to recruit some of these department heads, given our pension situation where we now have a 401 type pension? Or do you have any insight on that?
It's definitely harder to recruit that, especially, for positions like a tax collector and a tax assessor where you're calling from other municipalities where you have specific municipal requirements that are in the charter that require to come in to the position. I think Bob would confirm that with the assessor, we went out originally with the assessor, we did a first round of interviews, and then we basically went through, quite frankly, the state assessor list, and we started cold calling people and asking them if they'd be willing to come here. I don't want to call out any towns, but we definitely called around the area and similar communities. We were up front with them. We were hoping to get some people that had already invested in the towns they were in, so they'd be able to come here. So definitely it is something you have to pay attention to when you're recruiting, especially if there's municipal requirement, skill set.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions?
No, I would just say there's a couple of members here that weren't able to attend tonight, some of them with some family matters, and they had a lot of questions on this, so I would not be surprised if we asked you back, even perhaps before our votes next week. So just to be on notice on that end.
Okay.
So hate to haul you back, I just want to say that now versus Thursday afternoon. So,
Don't leave town.
thank you. Yeah. Don't, so,
Ever? Like I'm still.
but thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Okay, so now we'll move on to the budget for Human and Social Services, and I guess we'll start with the revenue on page 47.
Hi, Julie.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to point out on your revenue for us, or are there questions on revenue? That's it.
I have a question.
Okay, Ms. Marmion?
Yes. Hi. So I have a question. I read about your Friends, the establishment of the Friends, which is really exciting, and that you had a fundraiser. Are you raising funds that go to specific programs, new programs, or how do you? And I know it's revenue; it's kind of separate from you. But how do you funnel that? Those funds?
The Friends are a new 501c3, and their mission is to fundraise for the senior center, to enhance programs and special events. And they have had a few fundraisers and been very successful. They have 90 new members, so the new members are all participating. They're committed, and we recently did the Fairfield County Community Foundation Giving Day online fundraiser, which netted a small amount, but it really put us into the game with everyone else, and it was specifically for the renovation of the dining hall in the senior center as a multimedia dining hall, so that we could have PowerPoint presentations, movies, and offer it to the community for possibly a rental fee, so that they could also use it, but primarily for the seniors. So yes, they are doing things specifically for activities, special events, and in this particular case, yes, to help with the projector and different items that we will need for the multimedia room.
So, for example, next year, we might see a revenue line that has, rental space that might have gone up because you've got this multimedia capability? Is that,
I would have to check with
I'm just
Selectman's
thinking,
office
is
and
that
the
the kind
finance.
of, that's
Yeah.
your kind of goal? You want to raise more money by renting the
Yes.
space, and now, because of the fundraising, you have the multimedia capability that outside groups might
Yes.
want to use?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Any other questions on revenue? No? Okay, so we'll turn to your budget now on page 269.
So the highlight of the budget, at least for me, is that I transferred some money, $10,000, from one account to the other. So I transferred it from the line 54320, maintenance repair of buildings and grounds, reduced it from $32,000 to $22,000, put the $10,000 into fees and professional services. The reason I did that is because for the past year, we have piloted a enhanced lunch senior food meal program, and it's been very successful. It is funded through the Area Agency on Aging, through federal funds from the Older American Act. However, the cost of food and things have gone up, the increase in the number of seniors that are looking for this meal. There is only a donation asked for, so the actual cost of the meal is still, it's defrayed only by the donations. So in order to have an enhanced meal, which was really popular and I think very important for the seniors, there was a deficit each month from what they collected as donations to what the actual charge was from the food service. So I had used donations last year to the tune of about $10,000. So I asked to have that money put into the budget so that I could continue the program, not deplete donations, but rather continue with the meal program for the 45 to 50 seniors that attend Monday through Friday for the hot lunch.
Okay, are there questions? Ms. Marmion?
So in terms of the number of social workers you have on staff, are you finding that you're meeting the needs of seniors in town with existing staff? And if not, what are the unmet needs, and where do we go from there?
Thank you. Currently, we have 4 part-time social workers. 2 work 14-hour 2 days, and the other 2 work 3 days, 19.5 hours. There is a part-time secretary also who takes calls. We've supplemented a lot of the social services with Sacred Heart social work interns as well as Western Connecticut University interns. The last thing we do is actually write a check or pay for someone. It's not the money in social services, crisis assistance. We do get funding from United Way, we do have Salvation Army funds, and I do have all that itemized for you, which I can send. But the most important is that we're spending time with people, trying to help them not return to this same place of crisis. And our senior numbers are growing. The complication of complexities of intergenerational households is also growing. We work closely with the police and fire, and we're continuing to increase the number of referrals that we follow up with the police and the fire to investigate, particularly well-being, welfare calls with the seniors. The time that is involved with that is substantial, but more importantly, the supervision is what I consider one of my top priorities. An example today was just, a senior who was distraught, who was upset with a utility company and made a threat against his own life, warranted our referring to the police, protective services, as well as mobile crisis. That all takes time, so that completely changed the plans for the day, if you will. Very important, though, for someone in their 80s who is living alone and may not have dementia, but may have some information processing and some delusional issues. So these are not folks that are needing to go into a nursing home or needing to be any of that. They're living with us, but they need some attention for their particular problem. Does that answer your question?
It does. I'm just wondering about resources. Do you have the resources you need if you mentioned the issue is growing? And I don't know, and I don't have any data to support this, if a lot of people in Fairfield know that those services are available. And I don't know what that's caused by, but I think it's such an important service that your center provides, and I'd like people to access it, but then I'm also wondering, do we have enough resources to meet that need? So you don't have to say, yes, we have enough, or no, we don't. It's just a general comment.
Well, I agree with you, and I've taken particular measures this past year to leave the senior center in very capable hands with Julie DeMarco. Although she's part-time, at 1 o'clock when she leaves, I'm on duty for any of the senior center issues. What I would like, because I'm convinced that while we specialize in heating assistance, and I think we could do more, there's always a balance between inviting more and then delivering quality service. An outreach social worker would be ideal, and I was hoping to look for a grant to see what I could do. If not that, to have a social work intern. They now have a master's level at Sacred Heart. See if I could have some help with that. So those are all the things I'm exploring. Ideally, in a perfect world, to have a social worker who would provide supervision for her colleagues, would alleviate my having to do that, therefore being able to devote it to the rest of the department. I am working very closely with the 5 Fairfield-based social service agencies, Operation Hope, LifeBridge, Fairfield Counseling, Child Guidance at Fairfield University, Jewish Family Service, and we are meeting actually tomorrow for lunch, all of the leadership, the CEOs and leadership, primarily to talk about where we're seeing any gaps and how we can better coordinate working together. So, of course, the first thing you want to look at is that we're not duplicating any services. I do think that there are pockets of English as a second language in Fairfield. Really do not have the resources at this time to go out there, but my plan is to do so once I have some student intern to help. Thank you.
Mr. Bateson.
Yeah, quick thing. Thanks for being here, Terry. Bob, or Linda, if you look on page 270, when it says part-time current, I just think there might be a mistake on the total part-time. All the positions remain consistent, but it goes from 17 to 15, but I assume Terry's not losing any part-time people.
Oh, I can answer that. So last year, you very graciously approved a part-time position, and that was a part-time position for a receptionist, to have a continuity of communication at the front desk so we could have someone always answering questions and being on top of the information. Otherwise, we had volunteers that were out there. So I took that part-time position, and what I did was I gave it to 2 seniors who had been volunteering so they could job share the position. That enhanced our capability and our capacity to offer extended hours and have more staff, more people to help with the staffing. Does that answer your question?
What we did is we took the hours times the rate, and we had been just increasing every year a certain percentage, and we just trued it up by taking the actual hours per person. If you look, it's a few dollars. It's a $22 difference.
Okay,
So we just,
so we did go from 17 to 15 people. Is that what you're saying?
You have the
Oh,
same
I-
numbers adding up to a different total.
right, same numbers adding up to a different total because the hours are the same with less people. But we'll do the addition to make sure everything.
Okay, thank you.
We'll try it.
Right, yeah, no, you're right. We'll check it out.
Any further questions?
You're right.
Well, Linda's.
You're right.
Good catch. You see it too. Oh, yeah.
So, Linda, it should be 17?
Yeah, it should be
Okay.
17.
Okay.
And the dollar amount is just trued up by $22.
Okay.
I thought you were looking at the dollar amount.
No, I'm looking at number, total part-time.
You're right, total part-time is 17.
Thank you.
Okay, are there further questions? Is everyone good? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving on to the police budget. I guess we'll start with revenue on page 47, if that's okay?
You want me to just,
Do you want to give an overview
could I,
first?
just for a second?
Sure.
First of all, just to point out first of all, thank you for having us, obviously. Thanks for having us back. Just very briefly, want to thank several of the commissioners that are here tonight. We have 7 commissioners. There's 4 here. Commissioner Lebo, who is also the chairman, Commissioner Peterson, Commissioner Hirsch, and Commissioner Barrett. Also in the room is Sergeant Michael Paris and Captain Don Smith, who will be here later presenting the ECC budget, but they're there for questions also. Just a real brief overview, because very often we don't have an opportunity to share some of what we've done. This past year, we've had 4 police officers and 1 civilian retire. 4 of the 5, all with 30 or year more of service to the town of Fairfield. As a result, we've hired 5 officers. 2 of those officers were previously certified. 3 civilians we've hired, 1 in ECC, 1 for parking, and 1 part-time training clerk after a part-time training clerk retired. In addition, we've had 2 promotions this past year, 1 to lieutenant and 1 to the rank of detective. So last year's budget, we came in, of the prior year's budget, last year's budget, when we came before you, was basically a 0 increase budget from the prior year. And as you can see, this year's proposal is, I think, about 0.52% decrease from the current year's operating budget. We're able to do that in 2 ways. We've had a reduction in our capital purchases, and we're not funding 2 part-time positions, and I can go into that when it comes up. But overall, over the past several years, we've always tried to have a reduction. And I know we're talking about this year, but it's important to put it in perspective. Our advertising line used to be $3,500. That's wiped down to 0. We've reduced our Department 1 captain's position over the years. We've removed an officer from professional standards. We've reduced the number of supervisor hours on the midnight shift, reduced 2 accident investigators, cut our motorcycle patrols to limited to just special events and assignments, reduced the hours of special police in the downtown area, and some of you may recall, last year we removed an officer from IT, and we've hired an IT person for that job, but took him out of IT. And then just very briefly, some of the agency's tasks and accomplishments over the last few years. Our active shooter training, some of you have attended it to participate and watch some of that in virtual shoot and don't shoot. We've increased some of our training in that regards. As you know, last year we were able to get our 2nd boat through a grant. We have generally 2 vessels, marine vessels. Both of them now have been through federal grant funding and a 25% kicker, which we covered under our budget last year. We came before the Board of Finance. We also have worked with Sacred Heart University, and we have a presence up on their university with an officer, with an arrangement that we've made on a overtime basis, which they fund. Terry mentioned it earlier, but we're engaged, or Sands actually mentioned it earlier, but we're engaged with Fairfield Cares, significantly with Fairfield Cares. Our agency is patrol rifle trained over the years. Each patrol vehicle has equipment necessary if we were to encounter some sort of a crisis at one of our public buildings or schools. 18% of our agency is trained in crisis intervention teams. The standard is 19 to 20%. We're at 18%. Nationally, it's 20, so we're still looking to increase that. And that gives officers an extra level of counseling so that we don't respond to problems over and over again. We have those officers trained so they may be able to divert these individuals to other resources. Over the last 3 years, we've hired 9 officers who are prior post certification, meaning that their training there is limited. We don't hire them as raw individuals. 9 of them over the last 3 years have been certified prior to coming to our department. In addition to that, some of the automation we've done, which is important to note, we have e-tickets now. Granted, people don't necessarily aren't fond of that, but if you were to get a ticket from the Fairfield Police Department, it's automated now, meaning that even though you get it and might not like it, that process is quicker for you to get it. Joking aside, it does allow for more efficiency. Sometimes when the officers were writing the tickets, writing styles are different. Sometimes they're difficult to read. They come out consistent, and that transfer from ticket to the court is now automated. In addition to that automation, we now have evidence automated, meaning that we can track the evidence better. We also do evidence audits once a year to ensure that all the evidence that we're taking in is properly audited. But that's an automated process now. Our reports are automated. Our accident reports are now automated as state standards. We track our field training, meaning when our recruits come in, we've automated the process by which we can track their progress. Again, automations. And all of our officers are trained in Narcan, and we have Narcan deployed in all of our vehicles. And then some of the requirements that over the year that we found that we've now had to do. Electronic weapons, our tasers, we now have an annual report that has to be sent into the state. Family violence reporting has increased, as well as human trafficking. Once a year now, in order to meet the requirement of the state, we report human trafficking. On the way of grant funding, besides the boats I've mentioned, this year we've received a highway safety program grant at $212,000, distracted driving grant campaign for $66,000, seatbelt enforcement campaigns, $10,000, and as I mentioned prior to that, $228,000 for the second boat. And I will end by this, and I apologize, I know you've had a long night the other time. I just want to thank the men and women of the department. You don't really get an opportunity to do that publicly, but whether they're sworn officers, men and women, the people in ECC, our civilian staff, it's important to note that every moment in time, there is a member of the Fairfield Police Department who's working. So while we're here during this meeting, there's men and women out there on patrol, and they've done that since the 1930s, so we'll continue to do that. So thank you for my long opening. Now we'll go into revenue.
Okay. Now, thank you for the opening. It was very well done. Revenue. So let's flip to page 47. Okay. So are there any questions on revenue? Mr. Becker?
Well, just if you could just kind of walk us slightly through, there's obviously a little bit of a decrease, not a lot, but sort of the reasoning why, if it has to do with anything with the state calculations going down or just trends, be helpful.
And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Deputy Chief Chris Liddy. Talked about everything else but that. I would really be remiss when we start talking about budget preparation and all the work done on a daily basis to keep our budget in line. So this is Deputy Chief Chris Liddy.
And that's a good thing to do. I mean, I was looking right at him for the answer.
I know. Oh, no, I know.
Thank you, Chief. Really, revenue is a result of 3-year actuals across the board. If there's any questions about any of the individual lines, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. They look that way. I just wanted to make sure, in that decision to go that route, if it had anything to do with formula changes or anything, but that you're just...
Strictly 3-year actuals.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm good.
Mr. Timniak?
Yes, thank you. The permits you issue, what revenue do you take off that, and where's that classified under here?
It's under police licenses. Today's actuals are 20,630. So we're gonna come in slightly above that with 3 months left.
And that's for like gun permits, liquor licenses?
bazaar permits,
Yeah.
raffle permits.
That all goes through you guys, right?
Yes.
And that's all in that one category? Which is it's not broken down, so I'm just asking, which is like the leader? You know, how does it rank? What are the highest number of permits you get coming through the door?
It generally would be the pistol permits.
The pistol permit?
Yeah, we're seeing probably a 60% increase in pistol permits. So this past year, I think we're up to over 300 pistol permits.
I saw in the governor's budget, he increased the pistol permit license fee. Would Fairfield see any of that money?
I don't know. I know that I believe that the proposal was to increase the renewal fee and the initial fee, but significantly increase that renewal fee. I don't know where that would play into how much we would see or not.
I think it went from like 75 to 400 or something like that.
It was a significant increase.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was
think
like-
what we're seeing is now, as a result of hearing that, more people are now coming in trying to get under that increase.
Okay.
So it's driving that. But I don't know yet how it would play out. I'm not familiar enough with that breakout to see whether or not we would be receiving any benefit from that, or whether we'd have to review to see if we increase our fee for that.
Right. So my hunch on what I know about the state government, if he's increasing the fee, I'm pretty sure it's for their pockets, not ours.
Yeah, I
Would be-
believe that that's
that would be-
probably a fee that would go directly to the
Right.
state. When somebody applies for a pistol permit, we charge them a fee, and then in addition to that, there's a fee that they pay to the state. And I envision that fee increase is ultimately a state
Right.
increase.
Well, it's because I've been watching that closely, not just with the gun, but for the liquor, and that, as they increase fees, I want to make sure that all municipalities are getting, we're the ones collecting it for them, so we should be at the front of the line.
I don't think we've really taken a hard look at that, but that is a good point to look at what impact that might have towards us and whether or not that allows us to increase the fee that we're charging.
Right. So I guess for next year's budget, we'll keep an eye on that, and if we have excessive revenue this year from that, that's great. It's in your department, and next year we'll make an adjustment if it sticks at the state level, and for some reason Fairfield would benefit from that type of increase versus the state.
Yeah, I will do that. To be honest, I don't have enough of a handle on that. We're watching some of the legislation proposed, but that's not one of them that I took a
Right.
hard look at, but that is one that we probably should look harder at.
Yeah, I'm definitely not asking for this budget in
okay.
front of us today. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions on revenue? Okay, so we'll move on to the main budget. It's on page 217. Okay, and are there any questions? Ms. Marmion?
Hi, good evening. I'm looking at your capital outlay with the police vehicles, and I know you had originally requested, I don't know, here you have 10 police total. The first selectman had reduced your budget. What was it originally, and can you talk about how you're going to handle that reduction?
Sure. Well, generally, we, as a historical reference, we've kind of evolved from a 12-vehicle replacement per year to a 10-vehicle replacement per year. And that was specifically done because of the cost increases to put those vehicles on the road. It's not just the vehicle anymore, it's all the costs that come with that vehicle. As technology increases, we talk about the e-tickets and the printing tickets in the cars, the computers in the cars, all of that has increased the cost of the cars. So we've obviously didn't think we could sustain that over the years, and the model has gone down to 10, and that's been the model. Several years ago, through a set of circumstances, we bumped a request down to 8 because we did not have an opportunity to purchase all 10 cars the prior year. I'm sorry, forgive me. We asked for 10, and then as a result of the accident I was involved in, there were 2 vehicles that were not purchased, so in a timely fashion. So those 2 vehicles were purchased so close to the following year that we felt that we could reduce that request down to 8 vehicles that one year. And then last year, we've gone up to the to the 10-vehicle standard. This year, we had all intentions of going to the 10-vehicle standard of replacement. And when I say replacement, it's not necessarily replacing the cars that you see on the road every single day. We manage a fleet of vehicles. And so there's vehicles that are towards the end of their life, meaning they're not that frontline pursuit vehicle that we want to ensure the officer's safety in, but they have other functions while they move out down the cycle. So the replenishing of the vehicles on the front line ultimately replenish the vehicles down the process and down the line. So we're ultimately replenishing at the end of the line vehicles that are still functional that we need and need to be in good condition, but they're not that front line vehicle. And then, as I think Sands mentioned, sometimes we spit out some of the vehicles, and he's been the recipient of that. And I know this past year the fire department received 3 vehicles, and I think Department of Public Works received 4. So this year, the first selectman came back and indicated that some difficult, well, we all know, and we've all talked about it, had to be made. We at the same time, while we were preparing the budget, have an opportunity to receive 2 electric vehicles. As a result of a lawsuit settlement that had nothing to do with us, Tesla is actually looking to enter the police market. They've already done that in Los Angeles. That's their first market, and for whatever reason, they've chosen our area to look towards integrating some electric vehicles. So, look, there's 2 decisions to be made. We have an opportunity for potentially getting those 2 electric vehicles to kind of get away from the gasoline. They certainly, the way in which we're going to use them, we don't know yet. But then at the same time, in discussions with the first selectman, indicated that, look, we are potentially getting these 2 vehicles, and it's almost, I mean, it's pretty certain we're going to get them. Things obviously change. And if we do get them, we felt that those are 2 vehicles that we can add to the fleet in some form or fashion that can take the place of 2 of the vehicles. So that's how that came to be. In addition to that, we reduced, I think, 3 light bars. 2 light bars from that capital line item. That was just a decision made, given that we got to cut. We have to, and felt we could do that. And then at the same time, we reduced, I believe, our motor vehicle and fuel by about 3,000 or 3,000. Thinking that if we're going to get the electric vehicles, that's an opportunity to do that. I'm not saying that doesn't come with some challenges, some unique challenges. The perception will be that potentially the Fairfield Police are driving around in Teslas. I get that. I understand that. But at the same time,
You've got to write on the side, donated, free,
by.
something.
Yeah, but at the same time, we've always looked at whether there's alternatives to the vehicles that we're using now. They're certainly, we have to evaluate their uses, but again, it was through a discussion that we had, and we felt that we could do that. Understanding full well that if we don't get those Teslas, that we're down to 8 vehicles, and that's something that we're just going to have to manage through, and we will manage through it.
And they'll give us the charging stations as well, or is that something that we have to invest in?
No, they'll install 2 rapid chargers at our facility.
Okay. So where it says 10 police vehicles, we're really looking at 8, correct, on page 221? Or is that the original request, and then it's down to 8 now? Is that what it is? Okay. That's the original request. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. When will you know if you will receive the 2 electric vehicles?
When they drive into the lot.
Okay.
No, I'll ask Chris.
Yeah, we've received assurances that they're coming. It's us in Westport, but like the chief said, we'll believe it when they're actually in our lot.
Okay. And is there a cost to us at all for them, like for light bars and things?
No,
or these are other vehicles that the police department uses?
They're actually coming fully equipped with all the emergency equipment, short of a radio, but we can repurpose a radio from our existing fleet. In addition, there would be 3-year maintenance covered by them.
And can I ask a question? I'm not that great with electric vehicles, but my question is there a battery backup, or what happens if your battery is running low when you're in pursuit?
It's my understanding that, I've spoken to my counterparts in LA and how they're dealing with this. They have several deployed already. About a 230-mile limit on the battery. So what LA is doing right now is they're deploying them frontline for 2 shifts of the 3 shifts, and then bringing them back and charging for 1 shift.
And then, you know, you bring up pursuits, but, you know, we have a pursuit policy, and in that decision-making of the pursuit policy would be the officer's decision on the vehicle that they possess. In other words, we have policies in place. If our police vehicles are not marked police vehicles, then decisions have to be made based on what you're driving. So that would obviously be one of those things. We don't let our motorcycles pursue. That's an example of it. So this would be another thing that they'd have to take into account, the vehicle they're driving.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Timniak?
Thank you. I'm absolutely fascinated by this Tesla conversation. I've been watching them try to get into the state of Connecticut for years through aggressive lobbying efforts at the state capitol, and I think this is a very unique way for them to get in. I fully support it, and just Westport and Fairfield out of all 169 towns?
Correct.
Wow. Were you guys, did they contact you? Did you, like, how did we end up?
In actuality, they chose Westport for 2 cars, and then Westport called us because Tesla said, we will also award 2 cars to any community that touches you.
Wow.
And Westport approached us.
Wow, okay, well, that's great.
Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, Gary. Couple quick questions. How many sworn officers do we have now?
We have 108 sworn, but we're at 105. So we
108?
have 3 vacancies right now.
Okay, and how many of these officers, how many do we have in the school safety unit now?
We have 7 in the school safety unit. So we're up to full staff in the school safety unit from that proposal from several years ago. We knew that it was going to be a gradual thing. So we have 7 in there. That includes a supervisor and 6 officers.
What supervisors, a sergeant?
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant?
Yep.
And do we currently have any officers serving in interagency task force on a relatively permanent basis?
We do. We have 1 officer assigned to an intelligence unit.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any further questions? Mr. Timniak?
It's not in the budget, but how would you go about breaking out the different services you provide, whether it's patrol, what percentage of the budget would be patrol, school security, traffic enforcement? I mean, I guess the only way I could do it is by the officers and what they're assigned to right now.
Yeah, I think,
The major driver would be the salary lines that you see.
Just the salary.
You know, so 64 in patrol is obviously going to take the vast majority of that.
Right.
We could theoretically break it out by division, which I don't think it is right now.
No, I don't think I'm looking for division. I was allocations type. We can talk about that later, definitely not in a crowded room tonight.
Okay, Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, quick thing. Gary, in the beginning, that synopsis you had, there was a lot of shuffling.
sure.
Is that in the document? Like, you had said, like, it sounded like there was minimum manning, there was certain things you had discussed in the beginning. Like, and it involved personnel, like you were shifting personnel or responsibilities?
Yeah, no, that's just kind of, I don't think that that's in a document. It's just over the several years of moving people around. So when we created the deputy chief's position, we eliminated a captain's position, and now we have a deputy chief and 2 captains.
It sounded like at night we changed the supervisory structure?
At
midnights?
At night, there's a we've reduced the number of hours of the supervisory position on certain days and certain times, yes.
Okay. And all that is in agreement with the contracts?
Yes, oh yeah, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do you currently have vacancies within this budget? Like, that are, like, that we've been holding open, or is that every position filled?
So we, as we said before, we have two part-time positions, civilian part-time positions that are vacant right now.
Right.
One is a maintenance position, the other is a parking ticket, but as a result of some of the automation, we're able to kind of feel that we don't need to fill that. And then we're currently have 3 vacant police officer spots, warrant officer positions.
And will you replace them, or?
Yeah, our intention is to replace them. We anticipate that there may be more retirements in July, so, you know, that 108 is I think for a short period of time, we actually reached that 108. And then somebody retired, then we're down to 107. It's been trickling down since then. That's a hard number to maintain, given that unless you hire a certified officer, the hiring date to actually functioning as a police officer could be up to and including 8 months from date of hire. So that's something that we're still in the process to get those next 3 filled.
Okay. Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, thanks. Page 220, you were just talking about part-time. I see what you're talking about. Maybe this is to Bob and Linda. It looks like we have another vacant hold under part-time. Is that,
One part-time, right, that's what.
so in other words, they lost a part, Gary had just mentioned they were down 2 part-time or 2 vacancies, so 1 we're not going to fill in 2018.
2 we're not going to fill in 2018.
We're going to keep 2 open?
There's a custodian and there's a clerk, right. And I'm keeping the positions represented in 18, but with $0.
Right, so you're
that
doing
if they
the
decide.
vacant hold, we're going to fill them in reserve the right to fill them in 19.
Exactly.
Any further questions? Could you go to your main budget and explain, in fees and professional I think it's fees and professional services, that budget's going up by like 6,000. Is there a reason for that, or it's just general increases? Is that?
Give me a second to get to that.
217.
Fees and professional services. I just want to get to the line item that it's on. Sorry, I have 3 pages, because we have animal control and ECC yet to come up, so I'm
Okay.
just trying to find.
No problem.
Yeah, we, that's the cost of cable, cable TV.
Okay.
That, I don't know where that was before, but we've had to adopt that fee.
Okay. So it's new to your budget or being transferred to your
It's
budget?
new to our budget.
Okay.
It was the IT department that had been paying it.
No, we weren't, no, we were not, that's not to say that we were stealing cable prior to that and got caught. This was just a
It's a
reassignment.
transfer, okay.
Can I,
Can I on that, though, quick? They're not, I thought at one point they were giving that for free.
You know what, I apologize, because I may be wrong on that,
I
and
thought
I can
police
admit that
fire
I'm wrong,
was-
but no, I'm not apologizing saying that we stole it, but I believe that it was, and somebody else might be able to better answer this, but I believe you're right. I believe it was a complimentary service that they were giving at one point to the town, and now that fee is being implemented.
Okay. That would, okay.
if I can add a couple there, well, Cablevision was bought out last year, and they changed the fees. But I've stumbled upon something else through Cablevision in the new company, which is like, it's a French company, I think, bought it out. They're now offering digital cable, which is much cheaper than what the box cable. So a bunch of municipalities are switching over to that, and the savings is upwards of 50%. So I'm happy to follow up with information on that.
Yeah.
It's not available yet, but it will be available this summer as a new product they're going to offer. So I got a heads up on that.
Yep, okay, yes, certainly.
Okay, and then one other line item, motor vehicle fuel and lube. So that line item originally increased, and then it went down by the 3,000 we discussed before. Is that going up because we're using some of the older vehicles, or you're just finding you need more in your budget?
It's kind of rate of usage. You know, we talked about fully staffing a school unit. You know, we have a fully staffed traffic unit. Those require vehicles. So what we're finding is that, you know, we've extended the life of our vehicles, but there's more usage being used because we have more vehicles on the road.
Okay.
And that price fluctuates depending upon the price per gallon.
Right. Okay. Any additional questions?
Just,
Mr. Becker?
just walking through a couple of the lines that are going up then beyond that. So the communications lines, I mean, they're not up a lot, but they're up. Any drivers on that?
That calculation is a pure three-year average.
Got it, so you're moving there. And, so we got covered kind of with everything else, but maintenance, repair of equipment, that's up slightly. What's that again?
I think that's a 3-year average, too.
Three-year average.
3-year. And education and memberships, is that separate from your training line, right? That's up a little bit.
Yeah, if you recall, that covers officers that are going to school.
Gotcha.
And we've seen an increase in the officers getting receiving their bachelor's degree.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so I guess we'll move on to our next budget, budget 4050, animal control, on page 223. Before we go to the next thing.
Good evening. Paul Miller, Animal Control. Would you like me to start at revenue?
Yes, please, thank you.
Revenue is somewhat limited for the town, for animal control. The only real increase in revenue that we can show you here was in dog licensing fees. We have a new dog license program installed. It's much easier to work with. It allows us to do some time, to do other things besides actually wrangle with the licenses themselves. We've actually been proactive, and dog licensing is up this year, so is dog licensing fees. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but we actually are trying different media techniques and actually had a billboard up on Kings Highway this year that promoted dog licensing and safety for the pets. We're trying to get a little bit away from forcing people to license their dog, even though it's still the law. What we're trying to convey to the public is it could save your dog's life. In an emergency, in a hurricane, in a disaster, the tag is absolutely indispensable. So we're taking a new media tack with that, and that shows the increase already in dog licenses.
Okay, any questions on the revenue? Okay, we'll move on to your main budget.
Okay, the regular operating budget for animal control, we only have a few changes, and it's more or less, we tweaked one thing and took away from another. We actually added some money for maintenance materials. We are in the process of working with the Public Works Department to refinish some of our floors in the shelter. We've been there for about 16 years now, and some of the floors are wearing down a little bit. They need minor maintenance. To have a company come in, and we we've gotten cost estimates for this is prohibitive. It's basically out of sight. Steve Lenning from Public Works has agreed to work with us with some of the summer crew, and they're coming in and refinishing some of the epoxy floors at a fraction of the price it would have cost an outside company. This is a year-by-year thing. Do a little bit this year, do a little bit next year. It's not required or mandated by state law, but as a supervisor there, I can see that it needs to be done. I've requested $1,000 more in that budget, just to just to be allowed to continue with that program. And that program in itself is saving tens of thousands of dollars if we had an outside program doing that. One of the things you give, you take. One of the items that I cut was automotive maintenance. Usually, we only purchase tires through this account. Everything else is basically done through the mechanic at the police department. So I think we can safely do that and be somewhat comfortable. If we're not, if I find that we've cut it too much, I can always come during the year at a quarterly or speak to you next year at the budget, but I think we'll be okay. And the only other thing is advertising. When we get a dog into the shelter and we pick it up, it has to be mandatorily advertised per state law. This is all 100% of the cost goes to the Connecticut Post. The dog has to appear in a lost and found column in an area local paper. So that's kind of on a 3-year average, and that's what we've been averaging. Some years you could be more, some years you could be less. It depends on the situation. But we should be okay with that, too.
Okay. Are there questions? Mr. Becker?
And on the advertising side, how many people from the Post do you find when they come in, it's because they saw it in the Post?
To be truthful, really none. If the dog is from out of town, it's indispensable, but we have Facebook now, and most people zero in on our Facebook, and it doesn't cost us anything. But it's mandated by state law. I think a lot of these things that we have to do are like dinosaurs. You're going to see them disappear in a while, but it takes the state a few years to unmandate something.
Yeah, no.
To basically build on that, the Facebook presence has been phenomenal. They've built up on both photos and starting to do some videos along with that. It pops up on my Facebook page on a regular basis. I see lots of shares. I want to compliment Paul in terms of what he's done in terms of using that new technology. They've also reached out to some different websites and gotten some of the, I'm going to say, volunteers who are very social media savvy to leverage that too. So the dogs are getting a lot more exposure. What was the low number of dogs we had on site this year?
Currently, we have two dogs for adoption. And when we do get a dog for adoption, Facebook does accelerate that process of adoption, because not only does it go multi-town, it goes multi-state. So while our impounds have remained consistent, our adoptions have been increasing because of exposure through Facebook. And not just Facebook, we've used other sites too. We've used Pet Finder, that kind of thing. But now that we have a great exposure, I should say, to multimedia, it will help with the time that animals spend at the shelter.
Yeah, no, and I've been harping on the advertising one, but part of the question was about the Facebook. I have the same thing. It's been showing up faster, and your use of video, which actually really accelerates how many people are seeing it, has been great, and it's always fun to watch. So
it's unpredictable. I mean, I'm still in the phase of trying to learn Facebook for myself, and I think for an older guy, I've learned a lot in the last few years. But you never know what you're going to get from a picture or a video, and we've actually had people from out of state come in because a dog or a cat reminds them of something that they used to own. So we're now taking the market back where others were taking that from us, being more website savvy. But now and in fact, I just want to say something. Assistant Animal Control Officer Joe Fellner has been at the forefront of this, and he should get a lot of credit for building up our Facebook and making it a pretty good site.
I was about to mention his name. Yeah, it's usually him rolling around on the floor with one of the pets or something in a video, and people like it, and it accelerates it, so that's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good use on that, and to him as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Timniak?
Yes.
The part-time assistant animal control officers, there's 3 of them, is that spaced out through the year, or is that highly, more summertime? Is it seasonal?
No, that's throughout the year, it's not seasonal.
Okay. How many animals do we take in per year, specifically dogs?
It depends on the year, usually about 300. That can go up on one call, one cruelty case, it can go up to 400, could be as low as 250. I think this year we're heading for about a 300 count this year. But again, we have an ability to get involved in some cruelty cases that are very large. And on those cases, you can skew the numbers very easily by picking up 60, 70 dogs on one case.
If we have, I don't want to call it, vacancies or openings in the kennel for other dogs, would you take an animal in from another town? Which doesn't?
We're somewhat careful about that because we used to do that with no questions asked, and we took a puppy from another town that had just been checked out by a veterinarian with its mother, and a few days later they came out positive for parvo. And we lost about 5 or 6 dogs from our shelter to the parvo. The state does not go along with that. The state of Connecticut does not recommend that, and actually will object to it if towns take dogs from other municipalities. It's always a risk of getting a diseased dog in, and so there is no cooperative. Of course, there is mutual aid. If a town is full and needs to keep some dogs for a while, Fairfield has always cooperated with mutual aid.
Some of what you're saying, the state's not looking to regionalize any sort of animal shelter whatsoever?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
If I might just add, we talked about it, but it does go without saying that, Paul Miller runs a really good animal control center. We've recently expanded and ventured into the volunteer program, although we don't have any real amount of dogs there that are going to benefit from that right now, but we take in a lot of cats, so we're starting to explore using volunteers for some uses, walking dogs. He's also oversaw the expansion of a walking area for the dog, so outside the back of the kennel it does have an area. So oftentimes people don't think of animal control like that, but he's been doing it a very long time, and he does a great job managing all the different things that require of a good animal control center. So I just want to point that out too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to Budget 4150, Emergency Communications, on page 233.
Just as a reminder to everybody, the Emergency Communications Center operates in the basement of the police department. It is a joint communications center run by an entire civilian staff that oversees the 911 calls, fire dispatch, as well as police dispatch, and Captain Smith oversees that operation.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Thanks. In addition to the personnel, all our dispatchers, the women and men downstairs, they're basically the first line for a lot of our residents. When they call for assistance, they get the calls. They're responsible for all fire, police, EMS calls that come in. They've got to be able to assess the calls, dispatch appropriate resources, develop information, and get that information out to the field. And as we see call volume increasing throughout the emergency services, that same call volume increase affects our dispatch as well. They become busier. They have more tasks to do on a regular basis. As we automate, that still means they're doing data input into the system. So their jobs over the years have become more complex, more specialized than what we've ever seen in the past. We're also responsible for all the systems in the background, the radio system for police and fire, the communication systems between cars and the building, because we're all automated. All our police officers have their mobile data terminals, so we're responsible to make sure that all of those systems work as well, all the portable radios. So when we looked at, we worked hard this year's budget, finding what meets the needs of the communication center, understanding the fiscal issues that are present, and looking over the different lines, We were able to come up and develop a budget proposal that right now is at a negative 1.2% over this current fiscal year. So I would be welcome to answer any questions you've got on that.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Timniak?
Again, following through what I hear at the state capitol, there's a lot of chatter about possibly regionalizing call centers. Is that something you guys have been looking into or hearing about? Give me where we're at with that.
You know, regionalization has been out there. We do discuss it, and we in fact have started to make discussions with some of the other municipalities, see who is interested, what benefits there are. There are still a lot of pros and cons to regionalization of a communication center. You know, it's not the big savings that some people may think it is, because even if you take other regionalize, you're still covering the same call volumes, and where the savings are, a lot of it is from the state, because the equipment the state has to put into our centers. But that being said, we're definitely looking at it. We're looking at numbers. It's a long-term project that we would have to do, as well as we look at the possibility of having to upgrade or move our communication center out of our basement at some point in the future. We'll look at what are the benefits and cons of doing a regional approach and seeing if there are other partners willing to do that, and see if it's cost-effective for us in the long run. So it's on the table, we discuss it, we're just not there yet.
Right, and I think it's one of those wait and hold things to see what the state of Connecticut's willing to put in. Is very important, so I see it, I think, is it California has 3 total call centers for the entire state? Is that what I hear?
I think it's somewhere in that realm of,
Yeah.
of primary, the 911 answering points, yes, I believe they have 3. I think dispatch centers, though, that dispatch the towns may be more, but where somebody picks up the phone, it is very limited out there.
And then with CMed, is that, I see that line is increasing. Did they increase their fees this year?
Yeah, they go up roughly, it's about 3.5% a year we've seen over the last few years for that service. They have a board that oversees CMed, and there's a representative from each municipality on the board, and the board makes a determination on the budget, and then they pass the percentage back to the town.
Ms. Marmion?
Hi, your capital outlay, that's for your radio systems, your et cetera, and it's gone down. Is better technology getting less expensive as it becomes more sophisticated, or are you just where you need to be in terms of purchasing equipment?
The last couple of years, we had a couple projects that hit that line. I think it was 2 years ago, we had to upgrade our audio recorder, so that hit the capital. Last year, it was a cleaning, or this current year, it's a cleaning service to come in and actually do a full cleaning of all the electronic equipment. This year, what you're seeing in capital is what we would do as regularly scheduled replacement plans. The fire department replaces a set amount of portable radios for their firefighters every year. The police department, we look at replacing a set amount of our mobile data terminals in the cars, understanding that they have a life bouncing around in the patrol cars, even though they're ruggedized computers. 3 to 4 years in a car, 24/7, they start to wear out, so we have a regular replacement schedule plan in place. And the third item you see under capital is the modems for the vehicles. The same thing, we're upgrading, but doing it on a scheduled basis, going from 3G, getting them all up to the 4G modems, and the same thing, looking at an annual replacement plan. So the reduction you're seeing is not out of those type of equipment, because unfortunately the cost for that stuff does not go down. I'd love it if it did. But it's some of the projects that have hit the last couple of years we've been able to eliminate this year.
Thank you.
I have a quick question on capital also. Is some of the replacements are for 8 and some are for 10? Is that, does that include the cut from 8 to 10 on the police vehicles? Or is that from 10 to 8 on the police vehicles? Or is that just the need because they're not all police cars?
So the mobile data terminals, currently we have approximately 34 in the field, and we try to replace them every 3 years or so. So even though the police cars may not be replaced, the computers themselves are still in use for that period of time, and I'm trying to stay on that same schedule we've been using the last couple of years and hope to use in the future, so we don't fall behind.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions?
On here.
Mr. Becker?
So, on the Capitol, looking at the 8 radios under the fire department, we have confirmation that they're buying in the 700, 800 spectrum, so that if we move to a new network, which will most likely be there, that these will work.
Did the deputy chief? No.
We'll have to find that answer
If
out.
we could put that as a follow-up, and if we could try to get that prior to our voting next week.
What is that again, whether they're 7 and 800?
7, 800 spectrum, which is really where any of our next networks are going to move to. Because they've got it labeled as VHF side for the compatibility, so.
Yeah, I was
The
just looking at
answer
what
is
they
no,
wrote as far
but
as
if we-
their request, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So I can check with the fire
I'm
department.
almost
and-
positive the answer is no, but if they could clarify that, that may be old language.
Yeah, I'll check, I'll have to check with them. But I
Please
can
do.
check and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. That's it, thank you.
Okay, are there further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I think for the next portion of the meeting, first we'll go out to public comment on just the budgets we've heard tonight. If there's anyone who would like to say something on one of those budgets, and then we'll go to, take a small 5-minute break, and then we'll go to the second portion of our meeting. Is there? Oh, I was going to offer public comment for the budgets that we just heard, the police, fire, or health and welfare. Okay. Okay, come forward, please.
Madam Chair, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen, good evening. My name is Charlene Lebow, and I am the chairperson for the Fairfield Police Commission. I just want to make a few comments. In the last 17 years, and especially in the last couple of years, our world has changed dramatically, and because of this, there's other requirements. The police department, not only in Fairfield but across the country, they have, can you hear me? They have come across many challenges and demands. And because of this, there's additional training, and also just to bring up a point that our vehicles do run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I know you're making some difficult decisions, but at the end of the day, we still need to provide service, and we need to meet those challenges and demands. So I hope you don't cut the police budget any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lehman. Ms. Barrett.
Commissioner Susan P. Barrett, an alum of the Board of Finance for 18 years. I first want to say thank you for your service, because you sit here night after night listening to all of us, and we all want everything. As a police commissioner, I am the secretary of the commission, but I want to tell you, we are second to none, and our citizens demand and expect what we give them, and it's up to you to make sure that that's funded. But I do want to say, as a commissioner, we also have training, and we have the Citizens Academy, which I encourage any of you to try to fit into your busy schedules. It's an eye-opener, and you really see the nitty-gritty of what we do, and we have many other opportunities. But I thank you for what you're doing, and I do support our budget, and I do hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening. Philip Dwyer, Chairman of the Board of Education. I know that the first selectman, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance worked hard with the Board of Education to create the school safety unit.
This is, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I got confused for a second.
Okay. To create the school safety unit. And even though we have hard budget times, we also have difficult times in this changing world, so I encourage you to continue to support the police department in the school safety unit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
And Madam Chair, There was a question at the last meeting about the Parks and Recs not voting on the fee schedules.
Yes.
And they are here tonight to respond to that.
Okay. Is it part of the follow-up for the other portion, or is it for,
It was requested, more information was requested, and I'm not sure if they volunteered to come or if they were specifically requested to come, but they are here to respond to the questions that were asked on Tuesday night.
okay. All right, why don't we have Parks and Rec come up then?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Anthony Calabrese, Parks and Recreation, and I've got our chairman, Scott Walker, with me as well. I'll just pass out, I'll go around each side.
Thank you very much for coming back tonight.
No problem. Okay, so I got caught up on Tuesday's meeting, so I watched the questions and what was asked of us. Invited Mr. Walker here to try to explain the process that Parks and Rec goes through when we put items on our agenda and when we take action on them. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Walker, and I'll let him walk you through that, and then I'll jump into these sheets that I just passed out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Typically, when we do review any kind of budget item, it's been past practice on the commission that we let it season for a couple of meetings. We don't always take immediate action on it, and I just want to apologize that I didn't appreciate the timing of this matter. There were some questions on the budget that was presented, so we went back to the director and asked him to tighten up the numbers, but we certainly could have done that last Wednesday. So I just want to apologize to, I know you guys work hard, and we're a little late getting your answers. But I also watched your last meeting, and you were hoping that we could reconvene the commission, and I sent out a call to various commissioners today, and it looks like we'll be able to reconvene on Monday.
Okay.
And be able to vote on the proposed rate increases. Time for your meeting next Thursday.
Okay, thank you very much for doing that.
Just to chime in there, that's if you guys are still requesting that after we present this information tonight, because again, the rate proposal would go into effect for May 1st. Even with our April vote, it would still go into effect May 1st. So we'll leave that decision to you guys. If you guys direct us to call a special meeting, then we will.
May 1st of 17?
Correct, this year.
So in theory, it'll help the current year's budget.
Yep.
A little bit, which we probably everybody, I don't think anyone here is going to disagree with doing that.
Just
And
2
it's going to
months.
help us into the next year, which we're looking for, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Bateson?
Oh, I guess you're taking questions on the material you passed out?
Well, I'll walk you through it first, and then if you have questions, I might answer them while I'm presenting it. So there's 4 documents that I passed out. They're all supporting. The top one is option 7A is what you should be looking at. That is what Penfield was built on the premise of. These were the initial estimations or best guesses to revenue that we would be bringing in and expenses. So those are what we've committed to, and I just wanted to show you, kind of give you a baseline of what to expect. The second page is a revision to that. So the left one shows you the original 7A options, and then to the right you'll see what I call revised, and those are what we're actually looking at. The grayed out column is current. That's the current budget that we're in right now. So that was really not even accounted for. So I would call that extra revenue or gravy. And then I would call year 1 our 17-18 budget, which is the next budget that we're currently working on here. So we were projected, I'm just going to go down to the bottom of the line there. You'll see we were hopefully bringing in 124,000 roughly. I'm projecting we're going to bring in 240,000, and that's based on current rates. Our rentals are up better than we expected, so we should easily beat the 125,000 they were looking for. And then that just goes straight through for the next couple of years. Third sheet, is actual, the top column, the top set of rows, those are the actual numbers rented to date. Those parties are already on the books. So we're looking at bringing in currently on the books 38,000. In the budget was 12,000. So again, we're in the plus there, in the positive for 20,000. Then you go to fiscal, the next column, next set down. Those are already again on the books for the next fiscal year. We've got 120 budgeted. We already have 72 in the books. And then that last set is based on our best guess of what kind of the number of rentals we're going to do. That's basically saying between now and May 1st, we may get one more July rental. We may get 3 more August rentals. So again, that's our best guess based on everything we've been told and seen in the history of this building, so and the other buildings. And then the fourth sheet is the actual sheet that the Parks and Rec Commission was presented. This is a revised version. They asked me to tighten up the numbers. Basically, they wanted to see if a resident rate went up 20%, then they wanted to see the non-resident rate go up at least 20%. They didn't want to see the non-resident rate go up 18% or less than what the other percentage was. So again, these are the numbers that I'm looking at. So you'll see that for May 1st of this year, we're jumping from proposed jumping from $1,100 for a resident weekend party to $1,800. That is a 63% increase. We've comped out other places, other rental facilities, and this still puts us in the middle of the pack, which is where I feel we're very comfortable with. But again, these are proposed. This is where we're going. I don't know that the commission is going to say, I don't know that they're going to be comfortable with a 63% increase. They might say, they would like a little less. They might say they want more. But I think this is where we want to be, and I'm going to have them go year by year. So next vote for them, they're going to vote on the upcoming year's rates. So for 17-18's rates. Hopefully everything goes well and we stay on schedule, and then the following year, they'll vote for the next increase, as opposed to taking it all in one shot, doing approving 5 rate increases right now. I don't want to pigeonhole us into, a rate that might not work for us. We might find that, we raised it 60% and we're not getting the number of rentals that we expected. So again, we're trying to hit that market sweet spot. So I'll take any questions you have now. Hopefully that answered all of them. But
Okay, Mr. Bateson.
Thank you, Anthony. This was I love your page 4. And I like page 3. I like that analysis of how you can, the open dates. That's well done. Page 2. Right next to the grayed out column, revised 17-18.
Yep.
Is that based on existing rates?
It is. So 17-18, if I transferred all these correctly, should match up with page 3. Okay. And that would include the 72 that's on the books already in that second set of numbers.
Yep.
And the projected 131 in that third set of numbers.
And that projected would be at the existing rates, assuming Parks and Recs didn't do anything on Monday night.
That's correct.
Okay. Good job. And while I have the chairman of the Parks and Rec, any revenue you can give us would be appreciated. Any revenue. I mean, if there's a demand out there, you guys, Anthony, I like what you did, the sheet. It looks like you're predicting what we could get. If you guys feel we can get the money for it, I mean, I'd like to maximize the revenue out of Penfield 1. It looks like we have 2 options down there. I mean, maybe you can sell them like, hey, maybe if 1,800 is too much for your pocketbook, we've got Penfield 2, it's a little less, I mean, treat it like a business. Get as much as we can out of it. Thank you.
Are there further questions?
No,
No?
that's
I-
it. Yeah,
I
I mean, you're
think
going to
this
hold
explains
you'll hold
a
a
lot.
meeting,
Thank you.
obviously, right? You
That's
got
what you're
that
requesting,
sense.
yes.
I mean, obviously, yeah.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we would like to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll go to the second half of our meeting, which is the Board of Finance Public Executive Budget Session, our final discussion. The Board of Selectmen are welcome to stay as ex officio members, but they also can leave if they'd like. And thank you. It is simply our final discussion on questions that may have arisen during our budget hearings, and it's a chance to ask additional questions, discuss amongst ourselves anything that's come up, and we thank you for being here. So let me open it up to the board. Is there any questions that have come up with the Board of Ed that we would like to discuss, or we have many representatives of the Board of Ed here. If we have further questions on additional information that they sent to us, or questions on their budget. Ms. Marmion.
I guess it's not really, it's not specific to your budget as much as we've heard a lot. I've been talking to people, some of our state delegation, and they've told me so far, and I think they've told others, that there's not an appetite for voting to approve that transfer of the pensions to the town level. That's what they're, on both sides of the aisle. Republicans don't support it, Democrats don't support it. I'm wondering if you have any information that's any different, or if that's the general feeling that you've gotten in talking to people at the state level. So I don't know if you can comment on that, but that's that's what I've been hearing, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can add.
It's a question of great interest to boards of education. As soon as the budget came out, an email chain started around chairs of boards of education, essentially asking, what is your community doing in reaction to that? Universally, which means 100% of the board chairs reported that their boards were going to oppose it, and that their towns were developing their budget based on the needs of the students, as if the pension would not come down to us. And I have personally heard the same thing that Ms. Marmion has talked about, is CABE has not reported through various lobbyists who roam the halls of Hartford that there's any appetite whatsoever for local legislators to transfer $400 million worth of costs from the state down to their local communities. And so I would agree with you that based on all the conversation I've had with state legislators, lobbyists who roam the hallways, with CABE and CAPS lobbyists who roam the hallways on behalf of public education, as well as with the chairs of local boards of education, I would be very surprised if that ended up being passed, but...
And I would just concur. Our organization, superintendent's organization, would say the same thing. We're very much in agreement that we don't believe it's going to be passed down at this time.
Okay. Mr. Becker.
So similar lines to that, are all the sort of reductions or transfers into Board of Ed, like the $1 million hit, are those all still shaping up, you think, as things are moving forward right now? Or has
Actually,
anything gotten better?
I was just in a conversation during the break about this very issue. We're watching the DDS closely. We know that there is pushback, and I think it was even in the local press today. There is pushback on the DDS. My biggest concern, which is that residential $1 million, is where is the money going to come from? Because if you look at the governor's budget, it was zeroed out on the DDS line item. So DDS no longer has that money in their budget, and the governor had not passed that money along to the public school system. So it makes me a little bit more concerned, is it just going to be a cut somewhere else that still comes back to the school, even if they restore, that they pay for that?
And our budget that started being developed in December and January before the governor's budget came out you won't see any increase on line items to accommodate that. And so if you were to approve the budget as we originally requested, we still have that $1 million, should it survive the legislative process. We still have that $1 million to find in our budget. And because the allocation for special education has effectively been reduced, they took 3.3 away from our district, put 2.0 back into the town for special ed, so the net of 1.3, we have to find the $1 million, and we have to find the $1.3 million, or approximately $2.3 million, should the Board of Finance kind of follow the logic around the 9.2 million pension fund and decide that the Board of Education and the various town departments should get restored to their original level. That's my backhanded way of saying, please restore the $2 million.
Now, watching on Fair TV, I did watch your recent Board of Ed meeting, but do you have anything to report back to us on the discussions you've had on how you will find this 2.3 or the additional 2 million?
You want to start? Or?
I don't know if you had a chance to see the tiered list, but the Tier 1 and Tier 2 is what we went over, and then I mentioned Tier 3. And that was really a jumping-off starting point of where we would be looking initially.
So under normal circumstances, we would wait for the dust to settle and then have those debates in May. The magnitude of the reductions caused the board, the officers, as well as the whole board, to say, we really have to start that discussion sooner. So the last meeting you referenced was the beginning of that discussion. I have no doubt that at the April 6th meeting, we'll talk a little bit further about it, so that we have a sense of where the board wants the staff to do real good research on what we would save if we made this decision or that decision. It takes some staff time to go through the ins and outs of the budget to have a good number that says if we make this decision, what is the financial impact? And so we don't want to waste that staff time on ideas that the board really is not kind of willing to seriously consider. So I suspect that we'll have further conversation on April 6th, and then have discussion in May. I have in my own mind pushed off the final vote instead of at the second meeting of May, which is historic for us, to put it off until June 13th, much to the difficulty of our finance staff, who then have less time to kind of crunch through the numbers and get them to the town. And it's to push it off to June 13th so that we might have at least the latest information from the state legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Mottola.
So, just so I understand, even if we restored the $2 million, you're saying that you're down about $2.3 million because you're not getting certain funding from the state. That's
2.35, yes.
5, okay, all right. And then, I'm going to like kind of pontificate here for a minute because I used to sit in your seat, and I know you're doing this, because I know you do look at your facilities and you go through your numbers, but, I mean, there's been a real, I guess, push for the Board of Ed to really look at your facilities and your numbers to see if some type of economies can be ascertained, consolidation, that type of thing. Do you, other than what you do, and you always look at your facilities and your plans, do you have anything in mind where you're going to, I'm going to say, take a closer look at that? And when I say closer look, I'm saying that because that's a terminology I'm using, and I don't want to infer that you don't take a close look at that. So it's almost like, I guess I'm asking you to maybe be more public about it because it's in your best interest based on what I'm hearing out there. So you can comment on what I just said if you want to.
So we handed out a document that showed Tier 1 and Tier 2 ideas, and there were numbers associated with it. Our superintendent laid out what she referred to as Tier 3 ideas that had some numbers on it in her own mind, but a lot of the ideas do not, because they really do take even more research. The Tier 3 ideas, which included, do we need as many elementary schools as we have? Is there a better way to supervise our 2 high school campuses? And I'll say other questions that were more, I'll say, structural in nature. And so those will be listed in the minutes, and so that there's a public, there's transparency about the kinds of ideas that we're talking about. The difficulty with those is, one, they take a lot of time to research to determine whether this is really a good decision, and two, the financial impacts of those are likely not to be felt for 2 or 3 years. And so even if we were to address them this year, that would not necessarily help us balance a budget for 17, 18.
No, yeah, and I understand that 100%. The way I'm looking at it is long-term.
Yeah.
Because we know we're going to be back here next year and probably doing the same song and dance until Hartford gets its act together. And, I mean, your goal, you know what your goal. Your goal is to maintain the quality of educational service that we have, improve them, and be as efficient as possible. And if you have to consolidate a building to maintain that, you don't close a building or consolidate and lower your standards. That's not what anyone in the town of Fairfield wants you to do, and I would never suggest that to you. So, and I understand that looking at something like this is going to take some time, and it may not take place because maybe it's not the right thing to do. And secondly, if you think it's the right thing to do, whatever that might be, very general here, it may take up 2 or 3 years to implement. So, I mean, I guess my only advice to you, and again, I'm preaching to the choir, is that there's a lot of public sentiment out there about efficiencies and do we need these many buildings and, that type of thing. So, and I know you're looking at it, but
Yeah, no, we are looking at it. If I were to pontificate as well, we build buildings based on a 10-year projection. And right at the moment, yes, there is a small decline in enrollment. But if you look at the 10-year projection, it starts with about 10,000 students in our population. It dips down, and it ends with about 10,000 students in our population. And while we look at a 10-year frame, the buildings we build last 30 and 50 years. And I've always been a believer that you don't sell assets to solve short-term financial problems. And they don't make any more land. And so therefore, if you get rid of a building or repurpose it and then trying to put it back into place as a school, in the long term, when you measure over 10, 20, 30 years, because this town is in the education business for the rest of time, that you really have to look at a much longer time frame than just simply 10 years in looking at whether we're allocating assets correctly or not.
and I've been here my whole life, and I've lived through, Osborne Hill closed for a number of years, Mill Hill School, we ended up having to reopen them. So that's all part of the equation. I certainly understand that, so.
And I don't mean to dominate, so if you have comments about Mr. Mottola's comment.
No, I think that what you're saying is exactly what we're hearing out in the community, and that we'll have to do due diligence to answer some of those questions in the coming years.
Sure. Thank you very much.
And the only other comment I'd make is the one that I made at the very beginning. We're not talking about buildings. We're talking about students who are in those buildings, parents who depend on those buildings, and we're talking about 1,400 staff who care about the services they deliver, but these jobs take care of their families. And so it's, although we're a public institution, when we start talking about, well, can we save a 2.0 person here, it's a human being that we're talking about, and it's very difficult to talk about that in public, knowing that the person you're talking about might be in the audience, or that their child is listening to the conversation in school the next day. So it's not an easy thing, because this is a small, it may be a large community by Connecticut standards, but it's a small community, and you're talking about people's lives. And so I think that's always a concern that I have when you get into this kind of discussion and topic about long-term asset changes. Sorry.
No, I actually agree with Mr. Dwyer on the assets and potential consolidation. I'm really opposed to that. I think we learned a very difficult lesson from what happened in the 80s, and so it would take a long time before I would be on board with something like that, possibly moving some departments and things like that, but I truly believe we need our schools and need to work to keep them open. Are there any other questions, or Mr. Becker?
Yeah, I'm under sort of a similar mindset there, and I think that the structural change comment, which is sort of reverberated through, when you were last here, in a lot of ways, I think a number of us brought up, just the town and the Board of Ed, and there are areas that you're not going to be able to do things together, and there are areas you're already doing it, but just making sure that in any possible way that the town and the Board of Ed, and if it involves sort of that structural, something more substantive to make it happen, but anywhere that the town and the Board of Ed can be working together to try to drive the cost down. And those are, sort of bigger pictures, and they probably in a lot of instances aren't going to necessarily fix this year. But as you talk about the human element and whatnot, that's true, and it is important to keep at the forefront of our discussions here, when we're dealing with everybody. But one of the concerns has been that we're sort of on a potentially unsustainable path, and everybody could be affected negatively if we don't try to right sort of our path now versus in the future, especially knowing that a lot of the things we're talking about may take years. And so, I just wanted to sort of bring that up again, and that the structural component was not so much saying shut a building, certainly look at it if you want, but town, Board of Ed, we're one town, and I think that that's something that we got to really focus on.
I might just add, too, that I hope when we sent the questions that you had a chance to look. There was a question that we made sure we put in there to answer that question, just about all of the areas where we are consolidated with the town. And I think it's really important because that's a pretty extensive list, and it's not what you see in most communities. And so we are always looking where we can partner together, where it really makes sense, in the sense that you have one organization that's working with, police and fire, and the other one's working with 10-year-olds. So it's really trying to come together where we can, but that's a very exhaustive list, and I hope you had a chance to look at that.
And not only, you asked about whether there's regionalization of the emergency call centers. Having merged 3 different YMCAs and 2 not-for-profits into a single not-for-profit, and the volunteers would always start out thinking, well, we're going to save a lot of administrative dollars. And yes, you save some, but that is not the driving force to that kind of regionalization. It always should be, are we improving the services through regionalization at a slightly less cost? And I think you'll find that combining departments, for instance, is Ann still here? Oh, good. So why don't we combine the HR departments? Well, we have 1,400 staff. You still need staff to process all of those hirings and retirements and other issues that come with staff. So simply merging the top position won't really save you a whole lot. And then you look at the different dynamics of the requirements of hiring on the town side versus a public school side, and suddenly you realize that for the small amount of savings that we're going to have, will it reduce the quality of our service to staff and therefore to the town? So just because it sounds good doesn't necessarily mean that in the long term it is good. So I think you have to be careful about how quickly you try and believe that just combining departments and it'll mean big savings, because it generally does not in the long term. That's more pontification on my part.
Any additional questions? Ms. Marmion? Or- oh, sorry.
No, I'm fine. Yeah, just,
So there, just to talk a little bit about what's going on in town, you've seen all the chatter about these Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and you were at the Board of Finance forum on Saturday, and you heard the passion that parents have for this town, but that was countered, of course, with other people who are very concerned with their taxes, et cetera. So to reiterate what I think Mr. Matola said, next year's budget is right around the corner, and we've got to figure out a way to keep our costs under control and keep our taxes down, and anticipate that the state might be passing or absolving themselves of giving us some funding. So I guess the question is, we have a strategic plan that's a master plan for Fairfield that we're about to embark on, and they're calling for people, volunteers, to serve on that, because we're trying to look at where do we want to go as a town. Obviously, education's going to be here forever and ever, but I guess with the Board of Ed looking at some of these ideas that are percolating and these Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, will you put together a subcommittee of some sort to kind of parcel out, how are you going to kind of really look at what's coming down the pike and what's going to be in our future? Is it a subcommittee? Is it within just a regular Board of Ed meeting, or how does that work exactly? Is it part of the strategic master plan? I'm just trying to figure out the mechanics. Do you need a subcommittee or a commission that looks at this specific issue? What are the ideas of how you're going to address this?
Dr. Jones probably has a better answer on this, but we have a new superintendent who's been here 3 months, 4 months, and we have a 5-year district improvement plan. We're in the second year of that. It had been our anticipation that that would be reviewed halfway through year 3, i.e. we have 2 years of solid information, and let's take a look at it and see where it needs to be adjusted. We have told the superintendent, the new superintendent, that this spring she may want to take a look at that and see if she either wants to tweak it or move it substantially. And certainly what's happening in the state, I sometimes wonder that if she knew what was going to happen in the state, whether she would have left Virginia, but that's a side point. That we are anticipating that she will help us answer that question, how much our district improvement plan needs to shift, and what process she would like us to use to accomplish that. I will say that the district improvement plan was student-focused. What are our goals to get students from K to 12 and be ready for the rest of their life, if you will, whether that's college or career? It was not management-focused. We do have a facilities plan, which is a separate document, and we have adopted that in 2010. We revised it in 2016, and I would say that that we consider those two to be separate documents. What we do with the facilities is one plan, one long-term plan, and how we positively impact the kids is a separate, because that's our academic goal. So we're giving the superintendent some time to get her feet on the ground and take a look at both plans, and then determine whether there's what process she would like to use to kind of revise and extend and whatnot. I don't know whether it's not a very good answer, but it's the practical answer that we need to give our new superintendent some time to kind of get the lay of the land. Do you have comments that you want to make?
No, I mean, the only thing that I would add is I think it's going to be critically important that whatever we do going forward in getting community input, that every decision we make is based on what's best for children and what is best for the young people in Fairfield. And I don't say that lightly, because it is really easy to make it a numbers game, and you forget that really your decision-making has to be based on children. And when you're talking about structural change, those have big impacts. So I think it's going to be a very thoughtful process, and whether that is a community visioning just to talk about schools, there are lots of different ideas and ways that we can get, the community involved to get input. Because I agree with you, it's going to be a challenge. From everything that I know, the little time I've been in Connecticut, it doesn't sound like it's going to get a lot easier, budget-wise. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, if I can, you have to dig it out. I can't remember the exact name, audit or assessment, but it was about 6 or 7.
You're talking about the operational audit
Yeah,
that was
there you
published
go.
in 2010, yeah.
Yeah, which was, as I recall, it was during the crash. It was a big hot button election item with both parties. We finally went and did it. There was a town one, there was a Board of Ed one. I think on both of them, to some extent, we got more why we can't do it answers afterwards, and they were pretty cookie cuttered and all that. So they're not a great document, but I mean, it's certainly a place to at least look at, and then look at Dr. Title's reasons for not, and maybe go back. But I think one of the things there too is, again, the town and the Board of Ed were sort of, there were some joint discussions, but they were kind of siloed off a bit more than I think would have been better. So maybe even start with it, look at the town one too at the same rate. And I think on the town side, there's another document from almost 20 years before that was,
I will say
There's
it's
stuff
sitting
out
on my
there.
desk right now with Dr. Title's comments about what was implemented and those things that maybe weren't, why they weren't at the time. But that is something that I've studied.
Yeah.
So.
Any other questions? Anything that's come up on the additional material they provided?
Well, so two things. So one, you were going to look into, Dr. Jones, the electronic copy of the budget, either Excel or Access or something along those lines. Have we gotten anywhere with that, and what you can and can't do with it?
Right, our Director of Finance did go out and look at what is provided from the town. We are structurally set up a little bit differently, so if you'll give me a little bit more time on that one.
Okay.
Without spending a tremendous amount of staff time to go in and categorize everything.
Okay. So at this point, I mean, we're running up on, into next week's vote. So
Right.
I would say, I mean, great to figure it out and it helps others the next board, but otherwise maybe put it as something for next year's budget cycle. I don't want to put, this is a chaotic time, so it's not really going to be majorly impactful, but maybe we could talk in the interim and come up with something for next year then. That'd be, certainly if that helps you guys a little bit. On the other one, Mr. Dwyer, you'd mentioned, I think during the break, something with open choice. Did you have more information related to it, or are you just ready for questions? Because if you do, let's maybe do that.
Actually, it's reasonably hot off the press. I got it at 5:53 tonight.
Nice turnaround time then.
Just pass this one out. I guess it might be easier. Thank you. Do you want a copy in front of you?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
It's just one page. You're welcome.
And you gave them enough copies for the absent people as well?
I did, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume that you'll get these to the other committee members as well, right? Including the 3 members of the Board of Selectmen?
Sorry, did it get all the way around? So this is just an attempt at trying to answer that question, because it's a complex one, and trying to figure it out is going back and, again, looking and analyzing data. So what you're seeing up here in that A category is what is the 10-year average. So it's looking back over the data over time for open choice, and what was the annual revenue per student that we were bringing in on an annual basis. What was the bonus payment that we were getting? Again, this is an average over the 10 years. And then what we have found is that on an annual basis, you can calculate that it could cost 1 teacher. And so when you actually go in and look at that, we're netting, on average, $116,000 to the positive. And these are all numbers I didn't really know until I went and studied them and tried to look over time. What you're seeing on the 10-year average net, then again, you're looking at what's that total revenue that we've brought in, what is the bonus revenue we've brought in, and then what is that calculated staff cost. And again, this is over a 10-year period. And that's still a net positive of that 1.1. Then what I did is, if you look at C, that's looking at that special education cost, because I've had several people ask about that. And the average in the special education that we were being reimbursed was around $56,000 per pupil. And then if you go and you look at, and I said invoicing because that's the easiest way to say it, billing Bridgeport for that additional over and above the $3,000, where it used to be we were billing for over and above the per student around $15,000. And so what you're seeing is we were getting an average of 56. This year that's 96. So that should make a little bit of a difference there. Below that, what you're looking at is the materials allocation. And this actually comes from a document that we use in planning as we're going into the budget cycle. And that is the amount of materials allocation that we give to each school site. And so you'll notice you have elementary, middle, and high school dollar amounts. That goes to the site budget. That's for materials. It could be really whatever the principal sees as the greatest need in their building, because it's site-based budgeting. Then I took the actual students and how they're broken out this year, just to give you a realistic, good picture of how many do we have in elementary, how many in middle, and how many in high school, so that you could see what the total of materials cost, which is just below that, which is at $13,730. So if you take that off of that net, you're still netting on an annual basis about $102,000 to the positive. And I think it's a really good number to know. The other thing that I have had, people ask about special education, and I think I do try to pay attention on the blogs and things of that nature, so I know what's out there. And there has been a number that's been put out. Well, with open choice, we have 60 or 70% that are in special education. That number, as of our response to our own Board of Ed back on November, was 15.3%. It's pretty much it's about 2 or 3 students, maybe more than what our average is right now across the whole district. So this just kind of gives, it was a really good exercise to go through to look at, are we actually net positive at the end of the year? Because we do get revenue for each student that we bring into the school district.
And on the materials allocation, I want to clarify what that number is. We believe in site-based budgeting to a small extent, where we give principals a certain dollar amount per student so that they can decide how best to spend that for the benefit of the school. And so take 5 open choice students at a particular elementary school, pick a number, 5 times 135, that school will get $600 plus or minus. That $600 might buy sports equipment for the gym. That $600 might buy a couple of new desks or some piece of equipment. It might be used to subsidize student activities for the whole school. That is not an allocation that suggests that that student costs us $135, but as a result of that student being in the enrollment count, that's the amount that is allocated to that school because of that. So don't confuse the two, if you will. But it's the best way we knew to document how much per student might be spent. I still maintain that it's negligible for that 1 extra student or 5 extra students.
And I might just clarify, because I don't know if I said it, but with the annual teacher expenditure, that's following children, which I think Board of Finance had asked over time. So over that 10-year period, and looking at, in 1 year, we might have needed 2 teachers, and 1 year, 0. But it has averaged out to 1 per year.
When you say teachers, can it be paraprofessionals, or is it true teachers?
It's actually a section teacher.
Okay.
Excuse me, what is the first number? Annual revenue per student, $184,000. There's got to be a...
Title.
That is actually the money that we get for open choice. That's actually in the budget.
Per student?
No, it's not $184,000.
No, it's $3,000 right now per student.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
So you're getting, so if I divide 3 into that, I get
Well,
60,000
this is the average of 10 years, and it has...
60 students.
It has been 2,000, 2,500, and then
Right,
3,000,
but it says
depending
per
on the
student.
year.
That was very confusing.
Okay, we can fix that. Thank you.
So what you're saying here is you get 3,000 per student, 184,000 average, so that's 60 students.
Somewhat, yes. The average would
On
be about,
average.
on
On
average.
average.
So you're saying 60 students is only one teacher?
One additional, yes.
For 60
That's
students.
because you've got to think kindergarten through 12th grade, they're spread out all over the district. So
Got it,
yes.
Okay, so you're saying that this... the
Think of 10,000 students
dispersion-
and dispersing, yes.
Dispersion makes it one student.
And what it makes it is one section where, in any given year, a fourth grade class at a particular elementary school, instead of 3 sections, might require 4 sections because of that one extra student. And on average, over time,
just-
sometimes
yeah.
0, sometimes 2 or 3, it averages to about one section a year.
And you're correct. This would be better if it were labeled exactly how it is in the budget book.
Well, it'd be better if,
For
I mean, just
open
obviously
choice,
it's confusing
yeah.
because of the way it's labeled. That's okay, you're explaining it. And then the student expenditure, that's salary only? Is that salary plus benefits?
Yes. That's what we calculate for to hire a teacher, is 75,000. Because you can have a first-year teacher, you could have a 15-year teacher, that's the average,
Is that
all
the average
in.
salary, that's all in?
Yes.
That's retirement, OPEB, or you don't pay?
That's our all-in
That's
cost.
saying healthcare is $25,000 by itself, so this is like $50,000 average salary?
That is our average. I mean, that's what we calculate on.
Got it.
And of course, retirement, up until today,
Right.
is part of the state.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So you went back through 10 years, you went to everywhere that there were open choice kids, and you were only finding sort of the 1, maybe 2, sometimes 0.
Right, because you have to remember when open choice students, it's actually 12 years, but we only looked at 10 years because we had 10 years of good data. They go into sections that are very small. So it's, when you have 3 sections and you had to add a teacher because the sections would have been 27, which was just a little bit too big, but you divide 27 into 3 sections, then they're quite small. So you'd have to have a lot of growth over time before you would actually get where you're going to need that 4th section as that cohort's moving through.
And this upcoming year, all the discussions about what's going on in the town, the open choice, the buildings, everything like that, plus the racial imbalance plan, where are you at with as of today, with adding to this? Are you still, a couple weeks ago, you were sort of...
So in our, you know that concept, budget high, budget low? So in our racial imbalance plan, we assumed that the number of open choice students will grow. But in our budget plan, we did not budget for that extra revenue because we've never received it before. So our revenue that's actually in the budget is not predicated on growth. And so that's what I mean by budget high, budget low. Budget high on the students coming in, but budget low on income.
But not so much asking directly to the specific line within the budget. I totally understand that. But talking about more the program in general, in that when we start now talking about, I don't necessarily agree with the closing of schools, that sort of concept, and right? But the big redistricting, buildings, all those things are now out there, and they're being discussed, and they're really big items, and taking more students in could potentially, have an effect on those things, or may not even be needed, right? If you just took the step that we don't really want to do, is sort of just, right, you talk about not wanting to just jump into redistricting, but if you did take that step, you could magically fix a lot of the issues that have dragged the open choice program in to keep having to add. You want to add them because of the racial imbalance plan. If you redistricted across the board, you wouldn't have that problem anymore, correct?
I believe the open choice students provide a positive experience for our students. So use a different word than problem.
I'm not talking about those students, but the racial imbalance issue is it has been a problem for us. Good problem, bad problem, however you want to label it. It's been a problem because we're constantly having to go and try to address it. To me, that's the definition of a problem. whether you say, I wish the state would not make an issue out of it, they're the problem, which, you know, when you talk about McKinley and all the people that like being there, the state's the problem in that scenario, right? But they keep coming back, and there's been a lot of talk of bigger items and, you know, how to address this. So if you were to do something with schools, and you were to therefore, clearly you'd have to do a pretty big, you know, redistricting, I would think you'd take into account driving that number down all over the place, and then you'd have a very different conversation about the open choice program. Not to say you necessarily would eliminate it, because I understand there is a benefit to it. But right now, we're talking about, as of the last racial imbalance plan, I think that was submitted, a pretty hefty increase in this to try to sort of get the state off of our back. Good problem, bad problem, however you want to label it, but they're on our case about it. So as of right now, in this next year, with all these big structural, however you want to label them, challenges, are you still looking to increase in this program, or are you holding off for 6 months, 12 months, something along those lines, saying, we as a district are looking big picture, and we need to understand how this is going to fit into it?
The small increase in open choice by relative standards, because is part of the racial imbalance plan that the State Board of Education has already accepted and approved. The only thing that they wanted us to change that we have to go back on is what is the time frame of action steps that you'll be taking so that they can better monitor that we haven't just given them a plan, put it on the shelf, have no intention of doing anything, and hope they don't catch up to us for several years. And so the plan itself, which included the open choice that you referred to, has already been accepted by the state. And the majority of the board at the moment has no intention of changing that. And so that is still part of our plan. And as I say, the revenue is not counted because we're not quite sure, just because we've put it in our plan, we still have to have parents and students agree to come. We still have to have the state provide the financing necessary. And we have to have CES manage the process. People were asking at the last meeting if we have an update on what the state is doing with open choice. And so we contacted CES and asked. They're the ones who manage the program. They don't have any update.
And that is, there's an answer to that question, too, in that packet. And I actually put in a direct response from their email, just so you'd have their language.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and thank you for including that portion. And to be clear, because this came up at the last meeting, nobody is talking, that I've heard, at this meeting or the prior, one year before us, about the students that are already here and any sort of a shift. I think we've made very clear that that's sort of the human element of this. And,
Yeah.
And we're talking, at this point, we're talking purely a number. There isn't an individual or anything to that effect, but we're talking about possible future numbers and sort of.
Yeah,
how those pieces
our commitment has been, as all school districts are, is once you have the child, you keep the child because they're in that system. And that would be our intent to do that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, Mr. Becker, you are talking
wanted
about
to be
what
clear.
will be the new group of students. And so those are all decisions that are made over the summer based on registrations and where we have openings and what number of students express an interest in coming to Fairfield.
Have you determined the time frame that you're going to provide to the state? Is part of this the increase in next year's budget that we're about to approve, or is that
So-
future budgets?
Yeah, so there's no increase in the budget. There is increase in the racial imbalance plan, but there's no increase in the budget. So the last time I talked, I don't know, is whether the CES has actually sent us the form that you fill out to say, here's where we have spaces available. And so you fill out that form, and then you send it into CES, and then later, I don't know exactly what time frame, but later on, they match the open spaces with the requests from students and parents, and see where there's a match.
Okay. So even with the state racial imbalance plan, you don't plan to increase the numbers for the current fiscal year that we're going to approve the budget for?
Well, the plan has up to 18, and I think that's what's key, is up to, because I can tell you from a school superintendent, I'm going to be extremely, extremely conservative before we're going to open a spot if we don't truly know what our numbers are looking like going into next year, especially when we're faced with the budget that we are now, where we could see our class sizes going up. So it may look like we're one student over, but we may not really be if we end up having to increase class sizes slightly. It's just, we're in such a difficult budget time. We'll have to watch it very closely. But they haven't even asked this year, and normally they would have asked in February.
And the only thing I'd clarify is, we are planning on it programmatically. We have not budgeted for it. So when you ask, in this budget year, are we planning on it? In this budget, it is not in there, but we are planning on it, subject to the comments that we've made, is that we have spaces available to grow, and that they have parents who are interested in coming, and the state has financing that allows for it to happen. So those are a lot of ifs. So we plan for it, but unless those things come true, it may not happen.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Becker?
And just another item and related to sort of like the 3,000 figure, there's the magnet school fee. I read something today that we're joining in on and I know you're not going to be able to dive in if it's a legal thing, but just to highlight, but is it correct we're diving in on a lawsuit to sort of say we're not going to, we don't believe we should be paying?
Yeah, I
or
think you're
something
talking about what
like that?
Stanford, I believe, has filed. Stanford, right? Stratford, thank you.
Stratford, there you go.
Stratford has filed. We are named in that because we are a school district that's being asked to pay tuition. That is not being driven by our school board or Fairfield at the moment, but they list the schools that are in that situation. But that's actually there.
So we're just a party in that?
No.
We're not even a party in it.
No, we're not a party.
We're just named.
They list, I believe, and actually, Ms. Mensah, you may be able to articulate better than I, they have named the school districts who are having the same impact as they are, but it is their.
It's their thing? Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
We had not had any discussion at the board level about whether we would join that lawsuit. At the last meeting, you might recall that our superintendent mentioned that, yes, we host 72 students here, but Bridgeport hosts 250 of our students in their various schools. And we think it benefits both us on the receiving end and our students on the sending end. And my personal opinion is joining a lawsuit like that is not something that is worth our time. But that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. No, I saw it. We're talking about these back and forth with students.
And
so
so
I thought it was worth bringing up.
I hadn't seen the article. I think it's unfortunate that they would, quote, drag Fairfield into the discussion simply by naming our town, because I went to one information session just to hear what they were talking about and have not participated in anything since.
Okay. I'm good.
Any other questions?
One other item. On the 10-year average net B, I think that 6,843 is supposed to be 68,430
No, the 10-year bonus, it's actually 6,000.
over the whole 10 years?
You only get it in certain years where you've had an increase over the prior year, and so we only had that once, I think, or twice.
But up.
Oh, you know what, you are
up-
correct.
Up above,
No,
it
you are
shows-
correct. Yeah, I think you are correct. I'll have
Oh,
to
yeah?
go back and check that.
Okay, we'll check.
Yeah, I mean, and then, could you mind, and where I'm going with this is, this has to go online and get distributed.
Right.
You might want to make the corrections.
Right.
And send it over before we post it, with the backup and with the minutes and stuff. And then, and could you explain, and maybe I'm the only one who didn't catch it, the definition in the special ed, the 56,000 versus the 96, this is exactly what?
That's actually money that if let's say our student cost us 15,000 for the students that
But
are.
this isn't open, choice students anymore. This is special ed students, or?
These are open choice students who are also receiving special education services.
Got it, okay.
And we were getting our funding based off I'm going to say it's a reimbursement, but for what was over that 15,000. This year, we have made the adjustment, anything that's over that $3,000 mark is what we're billing Bridgeport for. So you'll see an increase from that 56 to 96.
Is this, whatever the total differences are for the cost of those students, are they factored into your bottom line net? I mean, it doesn't look like,
Well, because it's still that 3,000 that's coming in, and you're getting that difference between the 3,000 and the 15.
you get 100% of it?
That 3,000 and the 15, it's actually very few students here.
No, but do you get 100% of the difference between the
Actually-
special ed and the?
Where's Andrea? Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is kind of irrelevant information from that perspective.
Well, it's only relevant because everyone has asked about it, and it's one of those questions that comes up everywhere.
So if you can make the two corrections on the per student and on the 68,000, and maybe you find that a little better, then it'd be a better document to post tomorrow.
Sure.
Our prevalence rate for special ed is about 12%, give or take.
Yes.
And for the open choice, it's about 15%. So 3% times 60 students is about two more students in that group than what you might typically see in the entire district. So it is, we're not talking about a lot of, a big difference when you make it into both 2 times the difference between 3,000 versus 15,000. It's a pretty small difference. Some people have suggested that there were a lot of special ed students that come into open choice. Substantially, it's about the same prevalence rate as what we have in town, in terms of real numbers.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for being here and for coming. I'd just like to say that I have 2 recent graduates of your school system, and both of them got an excellent education and are very successful, and I think you will continue that, so I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other items that the board would like to discuss? We have a few other people, I guess, in attendance, if you have questions for them.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
So, Bob, if we didn't have to account for the $9 million teacher's pension, and there weren't cuts in the first selectman's budget, if you follow what I'm saying, what, in other words, we get the $2 million back to the Board of Education, the town, you know, that goes away, and I think restoring some of the library funds. What was the budgetary increase? Do you follow what I'm saying? What would it have been? Because the $9 million came out of the blue, pretty much, and he had to adjust.
You reduce the budget by $9 million and leave everything else the same.
Without the cuts that...
No, including the cuts. Leave everything else the same.
Okay,
No, we just reduce the expense.
right.
Okay. That would bring the tax mill rate change to 1.18%. And then if you added 3 million back to that, or 2 million, that would increase it by about, we want 2 million or 3 million?
Do 3 for
Two,
kicks.
3. That would increase it to about 2.17.
A total increase, 2 point, okay. Thank you very much.
And that's just 9 million to get to 1.18, or is that the whole 9.2? And is
That's
that the
9 million. I
9.2
mean,
plus
it's
the
just-
800 in the
Yeah,
fund
add
balance?
a thousandth of a mill rate, you know what I mean?
Gotcha. Okay.
Since you asked about the 2 million, what would that bring it to? Just so we have a few
That would bring it
ideas.
to about, About, what did I say, 2.17?
Yeah.
7 for 3
About
million.
1.88.
1.88? Thank you. Okay. 3 million, 3 million. And then one other question. Did we get a, maybe I'm mischaracterizing this or misstating this, did we get an answer on whether
That
or not?
1.88 might be a little bit, might be like 1.92 or 3 or
Okay.
something. Yeah, but it's in that ballpark.
It's in that range.
Did we get an answer on if we, let's say, for argument's sake, we pass a budget, but we don't take into account the $9 million, and then we set the mill rate, and then come August, the state says you have to contribute X amount. Are we allowed at some point to increase the mill rate, or does that have to be done by a date certain? I'm still confused on that issue.
Basically, and it's in your package, you got it today.
Oh, it's today?
The
Okay.
attorney basically confirmed what I've been saying, that there is no deadline as to when the Board of Finance is required to set the mill rate.
Okay.
That's A. B, that there are processes in the ordinances and in the statutes that allow for a tax rate increase,
Okay.
a supplemental tax bill. And C, there's nothing in the legislation that talks about decreasing a mill rate.
Decreasing.
Decrease.
Okay.
So it's,
So we could theoretically hold off.
if you did that, I don't think anybody would sue you.
Right. No. We could hold off for a while if we wanted to.
Yeah, the charter is fairly clear. It says after the Board of, the RTM has met and passed the budget, the Board of Finance shall, but there's no time constraints on the shall, or time definition on the shall. Obviously, funding the budget.
What would you do,
there's-
borrow money, or how would that work?
It would depend on what timeline we were looking at. You know, we could issue, the easiest, you could issue tax bills based upon current year's tax rate, and then issue adjusted tax bills for quarters 2, 3, and 4. Or if it's going to be short-term, you could get a short-term line of credit or a ban. There's multiple ways to approach it.
Ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What have been, I've been in government now for 8 years, but I don't remember, what have been our tax rate increases over, let's say, the last 5 years? Do you have that?
Linda has that at her fingertips.
And if I may on that, if you've got even a couple of years prior to that, if you could add them in there, that'd be, go back even further.
Okay, I'm sorry, tell me what you wanted it again?
What have been our tax rate increases over, let's say, the last 5 years, or even a few years earlier, if you have that?
I do, and so I'll start with,
Want to do 7 years?
Yeah, start with,
7 years you can go back.
let's start with
Yeah, that's fine.
last year.
Okay.
Okay, so that would have been fiscal year, the 2017 budget. It was 2.66. Fiscal year 16, 1.6. Fiscal year 15, 1.96. Fiscal year 14, 2.4. Fiscal year 13, 4.01. Fiscal year, I can't read across the line, 12 am I on? 4.17. Fiscal year 11, 1.96. Fiscal year 11, 1.72. And fiscal year 10, 6.72. That gives you your...
Two 11s.
I'm sorry?
you're back to 6.72 would have been the 2009 then, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
2000,
two
I'm sorry,
11s
yeah,
in there, right?
yeah. I'm looking across the data line. It's 2009.
What was
I'm
09 again, Dave?
So 09 would have been 6.72.
Yeah, just take the numbers in a row.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What was 10?
It was like the last big one before the crash.
1.72.
She's just going to read the numbers, and you guys can apply the years.
Reading them backwards, from 17 to 9.
Okay.
Okay? That's easier. Yeah, because my columns are far from each other. 2.66, 1.60. Oh, sorry. 1.96, 2.4, 4.01, 4.17, 1.96, 1.72, 6.72.
Have you got 08 in there?
Got what?
Tough year.
One more?
One more? Yeah, 4.44.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, while she was doing that, I had a chance to refine my top-of-the-head numbers. If we had a $6 million adjustment, i.e. 9 minus 3, the rate increase would be 228, and of 7,193.
Can you repeat those? I'm sorry.
228 and 193. 2.28, 1.93.
Thank you. That's the 3 million and the 2 million. You just did it. So you got a 2.28.
Just on the housekeeping front, today's, although they said they were going to adjust it a little bit, but then also the Parks and Rec, if you could just circulate maybe by email so the folks that aren't here get it. Maybe just, or just send them a link to that, but just make sure just that they get these too, because they were follow-ups.
Say what?
Yeah, it all gets put up.
Just make sure they send an email to the groups. Yeah, definitely, yeah, the corrected version, obviously, circulate.
And the 1.93.
Are there any other questions for Bob or follow-up housekeeping items, that information you still need?
Just some money.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take
Let's go
a,
for it. Make a motion.
Motion.
Adjourn.
David?
Thank
And
you.
second by
Yeah.
John Matola?
Good idea, Bob.
Okay.
it, and then we come back.
Thursday to vote.
Well, oh, we have to vote. All in favor?
Oh, to adjourn.
All in favor?
Audio? Off?
Thank you.
We're done.